Hello and welcome to my new class. Let me show you art materials I will use. So I'm using 100% cotton paper by Baohong. It has grain-thin texture and you can use other cotton paper that you have. It's a glued pad, so you don't have to fixate paper. I'm always using ceramic palettes, and I have handmade palettes and watercolor in tubes. So I place my watercolors right on the palette, and if you have watercolor in pans, it's also very good to mix on the ceramic plate or ceramic palette. So if you don't have the palette, you can use just ordinary plate. I will use brush number 4 by Escoda Reserva. It has very pointy end and I need it for this painting. I use mechanic pencil by Pentel 0.3 millimeters. It's very convenient for me, but you can use ordinary pencil as well. And also I have ordinary eraser and kneadable eraser. Kneadable eraser has this slimy texture and it helps to remove pencil lines from the sketch to make the painting more airy and light. And in watercolor it's pretty important to keep this pure watercolor texture and lightness. I also have some paper towels next to me to clean and dry my brush right away, and a cup of tea and 2 glasses of water that always is on my table when I'm painting. And now we can move to watercolors. For this painting I will use 5 colors: Permanent Subgreen by Jackson's, Azomethine Green Yellow by Van Gogh. I like Van Gogh watercolor and I use it a lot. It's quite cheap and it's a good quality. But they have this problem with the lid, that when the lid and watercolor dries, the lid sticks to the tube. So I had this issue with this color, so I had to put the tube into the hot water so the lid could be removable eventually. But let's get back to other colors that I will use. It's Payne's Gray by Van Gogh, and I can say that I'm a brand ambassador of Payne's Gray color just because I use it a lot in almost every my painting. I will use also Ruby by White Nights, and I have it here on my palette. And also I will use some pink color, Rhodonite Genuine by Daniel Smith. If you don't have this color, it's okay, you can just pick some other red color with a cold hue from your palette, maybe like Quinacridone Rose or something like that. And let me show you some of the swatches of these colors and color mixes I will use. So basically, look into these swatches, you can find some similar colors in your palette, or you can also check the pigments inside each color that I share in the description to the class. So you see that I put Ruby on the paper, and next to this color I will swatch Rhodonite Genuine, and it's very similar to the Ruby, but Ruby has a little bit more warm shade. And basically I could paint without it because I could mix my cold red, like Rhodonite Genuine, with a little bit of Azomethine green yellow because it's a warm shade, and I would get a pretty warm red shade. And now some of the color mixes I will use for painting these tulips. So I will need some darker mix of green because I don't use like shadow green or dark green color. Instead, I am using mix of permanent sub green and Payne's gray. And also I will add a little bit of Azomethine. And honestly, there are no exact amounts that you need to use of these colors to get this shade. It's more about experimenting and trying different amounts and trying to add more or less of each color until you will get the shade that you need. The next mix is Ruby and Rhodonite Genuine, and it's just other shade of red that I will use for painting. If you have one red, you can mix it with Payne's gray, and you can mix it with other or yellow color that you have, and maybe even add a little bit of green. And we will do all of that while we are painting, just mixing all the colors just a little bit on the palette. That's it. Now let's move to the next lesson and prepare a sketch. Before we start painting, let me show you some basics of watercolor techniques, like lifting colors and wet on wet technique. I will show you on this simple scrap paper. You can also use some scrap paper to practice a little bit before painting. When painting with wet on wet technique, normally I follow main steps, and first would be clean my brush and dab it on the paper towel. Then load my brush with lots of water. You see that belly of the brush has full of water. And I will cover with clean water the object that I'm going to cover with color, repeating the same direction of the shape of the object. So if it's round shape, I'm trying to cover this shape with these brush strokes that are going around. I will add some color, repeating the same brush strokes, and I will use less water and more color. And still the first layer is pretty light, so I'm using not too dark color because I will need this dark color for creating shadow later. And now I want to create shadow, and I use almost pure color from the tube. So ratio water to color will be more color than water than in the first layer when I just applied color. If I want to create a highlight on the object, I can use lifting. It means that I have to clean my brush and remove some color. And if the surface is already dry, I can apply some clean water and then remove the color with the clean and almost dry brush. But be careful, if the surface is almost dry, it will leave these edges of the watery spots. So normally it is better to apply color while the surface is still wet and lift the color if you want to create highlight also when the surface is wet. And let me show you on the second example. Now I will try to keep the white highlight from the beginning. Like you can lift the color, but sometimes the paper absorbs color and you cannot remove it for the white. So if you have this white highlight, you can just keep this area uncovered with color. And then we are doing the same, we're applying more and more color, creating intense shadows. And let me show you how to paint one object behind another. It's a common practice because, for example, even when we are painting the tulip, we have different petals that are going one in front of another. So we have to keep this front petal lighter than the background petal. And here you see how I'm moving the color towards the darkest area. So I'm moving the brush from the lightest to darkest areas. And in the place where one object will go behind another, we are trying to increase this contrast between two objects. So it means that I will try to make this front object lighter and the back object darker. To create a highlight, I will clean my brush and dab it on the paper towel, and I will lift the color from the surface. Now when the paper is fully dry, I can apply some dark color straight to the surface of the paper. Because if I would apply water first, the color would be not so intense and dark. And here, since we want to create the contrast between two objects and to show that one is behind another, we need to create a pretty dark color. And now when I applied color just right behind this object, I can add some more watery mix and cover the whole object, the rest of the object with this more watery mix. moving also from the light part towards the dark part. Let me show you another exercise that you will need for this painting. I will make a very thin lines with this brush, and you see that it has pointy end, so basically even with a big brush you can create these very thin and straight lines. So I place my arm on the table and only my hand is moving with the brush, something like chopsticks, and I place my wrist as well on the table, so only my hand is moving and it's moving in one direction and the brush barely touches the paper. So it helps me to create this very thin and very straight lines because I move only hand and brush in it. And when your hand is in the air, it's not very steady position and it's hard to control your brush strokes and hard to control line and its direction. So it's better to create a very steady position for your hand. And you can also experiment with the brush strokes and observe how you can create very different types of lines with one brush. When I hold my brush vertically, it creates very thin line, and when I press it, it creates shape of the leaf and some more flat stroke. So I encourage you to try this because sometimes it's even more convenient to use a brush number 4, for example, than some small brush like number 1 or number 0 for creating these lines, because the bigger brush allows you to create more consistent brush stroke and more long line. Let's start painting our tulip with watercolor. I will prepare my color mixes. I have Rhodonite Genuine and I have Ruby. I will also add a little bit of Azomethine Green Yellow to the Rhodonite Genuine shade to create a little bit more warm red color. And I will start, like I showed you in the exercise, with the middle petal, and I will cover it with clean water. I start introducing color, moving from the left side to the right side, and for now I will add some very light color, and then on the right side I will add some more intense color. Now I will add some sub-green color at the bottom of the flower, where it's connected to the stem that also will be green. Now it's time to create the highlight on the left side. I'm cleaning my brush, dabbing it on the paper towel, and I'm lifting the color like I showed you in the exercise in the beginning of the class. It will create this highlight in the middle that we need to paint more like vivid and picturesque flower. I won't even wait until the flower will get fully dry. I will move to painting the stem because I'm not afraid that colors will mix with each other a little bit. We already added some green color to the bottom of the flower, and now it's okay if it will mix with the stem. And for the stem I'm using also mix of Azomethine green yellow and a little bit of sub-green. And for now I will cover it with a very light shade, and then I will add some darker shade on this side. For the dark green shade I will mix Payne's gray and sub-green with a little bit of Azomethine green yellow. And I will apply this dark color on the right side of the stem. Make sure that the surface is not too wet, because otherwise your colors will blend and you won't be able to control this area of light color on the left side that, as you can see, I kept. At the bottom of the stem, the color will be the darkest because this part is go behind both leaves, and that's why I need to make it darker. And I can use my clean brush to smudge the colors to make this edge between the light area and dark area more smooth. Now I can paint the side parts of the flower, and I will mix my both pink colors, Ruby and Rhodonite Genuine, with Payne's Gray, creating pretty dark pink color. And I will apply it on the right side and on the left side. I'm moving color from up to the bottom, and at the bottom in this corner I will add even darker color with a little bit of green that I have on the palette, because it's also connecting to the stem, and later we will add even more green, but now we are just connecting the flower and the stem with this shade. And we are done painting the flower. Let's paint the leaves in the next lesson. Let's move to painting the leaves. I will mix some dark green color using a mix of sub-green, Payne's gray and a little bit of Azomethine green yellow. You can also use some just yellow color if you don't have Azomethine. And we will start by painting the right part of the left leaf. So basically I'm splitting the leaf in two parts, and I will paint one part lighter than another. I will try to make this edge between these two parts light, so I could create contrast between these two parts, and I can add some darker shade on the edges of this part. I repeat the shape of the leaf with my brush strokes, just like in the exercise in the beginning of the class, like I showed you with the round shape, and here is basically the same. So we have this texture of the leaf, and I can create these lines while the surface wet. I can create these lines that will blend, and we will add some more lines when the paper will get dry, but now we can just create this direction of the leaf. Now I can add some darker color in the corner of this leaf, and it will help us to show the diversity of the color value of the leaf. So it looks diverse in terms of color. That's why we're mixing few shades. We don't use just green color, and we can create different color values as well and show that some parts of the leaf are darker, some parts of the leaf are lighter. I will leave it dry and I will move to the right leaf, and basically I will do the same using the shades that I have on the palette. I will create different colors and maybe even add some red color. It will create some warm green shade that you can also use. So you see that I'm mixing all the colors that I use for painting the flower, for painting the stem, and all the colors are participating in the whole painting, in the whole picture. So here's the tricky thing about this leaf. It should be different from the stem and from the leaf on the left side. So I will add some darker color, but I will leave a very thin line between the stem and this leaf. So if you can see my dark color, it just going on the right side of the leaf, and I'm moving color towards the leaf that is lighter than this one. And now we can paint this final part, the left part of the left leaf. And I start with a quite light green color, and then I will add some darker shade while the surface is wet. And now the only thing left is to add some darker lines that show the texture of these leaves and direction of the leaves. So I'm using the same brush and I'm creating very thin lines and repeating the shape of the leaf. You can switch to the smaller brush if it's more convenient for you. Just try to not create a lot of lines, just a few, and with the different shades of green that you have on the palette. I also want to add some darker spots to highlight this contrast between the light flower and the stem. And if you see that you want to add some more dark areas, you can also do it right now. Our painting is done and I will see you in the next lesson. Hello again and welcome to the lesson where we will paint with watercolor. And I already prepared some of the color mixes on the palette and I will start by painting the flower. I will start by covering the right petal with clean water. Just like I showed you in the painting before, we will paint with wet on wet technique, slightly adding the pink color to the surface and lift the color from one side to another. And the tulip has this very light green shade of the petal next to the stem. So I will add this mix of azomethine and subgreen right away and will very slightly lift the color with clean brush. And I will start by applying the pinkish color on the top of the petal, and I will lift the color into the wet surface so the color will nicely blend with the water. We need to keep this white area of the petal, so that's why I need to stop and to not cover it with color. Also, you see that there is a small area on the right side that I don't fully cover because it will be darker than the main part of the petal, and I will leave it right now. I will wait until the color will get dry and then I will apply the darker color. Otherwise, the colors will just blend on the wet surface and we will not get the result that we need. And I'm doing pretty the same with the petal on the left side. Now I will mix a bit of darker pink color using mix of Rhodonite, ruby and a little bit of Payne's gray. So I could paint this small area on the right side. I will add this darker area of pink on the left petal as well, because it's behind the green leaf and it will be darker. And now we can move to painting the middle of the flower, but just make sure that your petals are fully dried. As always, I will cover it first with clean water. My water has a little bit of pinkish shade, but it's okay. And I will mix some like muddy color by using ruby, Payne's gray and a little bit of Azomethine green yellow. I will apply this color on the bottom part of the middle petal, and I will use it to make the middle darker than the petals on the right and left side. So if you can see, I'm just applying this color next to the petal and then I lift it with the brush, so the color would nicely blend with the water and wet surface that we have in the middle, because we don't need to make the whole petal dark, but we need to add this shadow just behind these petals. I'm loading my brush with a dark pink color, mix of ruby and Rhodonite genuine, and I apply this dark color again behind the light petals that we have on the both sides of the flower, to create this contrast between these front petals and the middle of the flower. And be careful, because we need to keep the middle area light and we will just paint it later. For now we need to apply darker color behind the petals on the sides. I'm doing basically the same with the right side, but I will just create the lighter area on the right side of the middle part It's hard to explain, but just look at the video and I hope you will get it. Now I will apply the clean water, a little bit of clean water on the right side, and I'm just lifting the color, the water towards the color and blending it. So on the right side I will get lighter color, and next to the middle of the flower I will get darker pink color. And using this light pink color, I will create the middle of the flower. I will create these very light lines in the middle. Once the paper is fully dry, I will create this texture on the petals of the tulip. And I will use very tip of my brush and not a lot of water, just like in the exercise that I showed you in the beginning of the class. Try to make these lines very light and to add somewhere lines darker and somewhere lines lighter, so we can create the diversity of these lines. You can use smaller brush if it's more convenient for you. For example, brush number 0 or number 1, because I'm using just one brush for the whole painting, but it takes some practice to use the tip of the brush for these thin lines. And I'm doing the same for the middle petals. I want to darken the shadow behind the petal, and I add more dark color, mix of ruby, rhodonite and Payne's gray. Now I'm mixing the dark pink color using rhodonite, ruby and Payne's gray to paint the left petals that we barely see. We need these dark petals to frame and to highlight the contrast between the petals in the front that we already painted. So we are creating like dark background for these light petals that we see in front of the flower. Now I can see the flower in general and to analyze where I want to add some darker shadows, and I want to add the darker shadow on the middle part on the left side, and I'm mixing Azomethine, Rhodonite Genuine and Payne's Gray to create this muddy color that we already used. But I will go again on this area behind the petals to highlight this dark area at the bottom of the flower. Now we can move to paint the leaves, and I will mix permanent sub-green and Azomethine green-yellow to create this nice, very natural green shade. If you don't have these colors, it's okay, you can just mix yellow and ultramarine or cobalt blue to get this nice natural green shade, or just take your green that you have in your palette and mix with yellow. I will start with the left leaf and a pretty light color, and I will apply more dark color later. I prepared the dark mix on the palette as well. It's a mix of permanent sub-green and Payne's Gray, and a little bit of Azomethine. So basically all three colors I'm mixing in different proportions, and I get lighter or darker color, warmer or colder. I apply some darker color to the wet surface, and the place where one leaf will go behind another, I decide which one will be darker and which one will be lighter. So it's time to make it darker, and then to keep it in mind that the right leaf will be lighter than the leaf that we are painting right now. Also, this leaf is going right next to the flower, so we need to create contrast between them. So I add some darker color into the surface of the leaf. While the leaf is getting dry, I can finish the flower with pink color, and I cover this small area, the last petal that we have, with the light pink color. Since I have this pink color on my brush, I can add some darker shades, some lines and some final details, final strokes to the petals that I already have. While I'm waiting for this leaf getting dry, I can paint this small little leaf in the right corner with Azomethine green yellow. I keep this area in the middle not painted. I will paint it later with darker color when the flower will get fully dry. Now I will prepare the color mix for the shadow on the flower from the leaf. So I need to mix Azomethine green yellow, maybe a little bit of Payne's gray and a little bit of Rhodonite genuine. And I have my brush, very versatile, without a lot of water, it's more color. And I paint this very thin line with the tip of the brush. When I paint these dark shadows, first I paint this darkest area, and then I clean my brush and I just drag the color with a brush with clean water or just a very light color to make this edge more smooth. And I slowly move into painting the stem. While the surface is wet, I can add some darker color on one side of the stem to represent the shadow. But remember, it shouldn't be too dark because the leaves that are behind the stem, they are the darkest part of the painting. So we have to keep it in mind that the stem should be lighter than the leaves behind it. Now we can paint this middle part of the leaf in the right corner, and it will help us to make the tulip, the flower, to pop up, because we will create this dark contrast behind the flower. And let's do the same with the left one. Now I will move to painting the leaf on the right side, and I'm doing basically the same. I start with a very light green color, and then I will add some darker areas. And the only thing that I have to keep in mind that this leaf will be lighter than the stem and the other leaf behind it. And in some places I can add some more Azomethine green yellow, which is more like warm shade, and I'm just lifting the color with my brush, and I will add some darker shades, maybe on the side of the leaf. While I'm waiting for this leaf to get dry, I will prepare some darker green color. I'm mixing sap green and Azomethine green yellow and Payne's gray, and I will paint this little area on the left side, and still it's not the darkest area. It's just darker than the leaf on the left side that we painted first. And if you will take a look at the reference, you will see that this area is like middle value, and the area closer to the stem, right behind the stem, will be pretty dark, almost black. But we don't use pure black color, so we will just mix Payne's gray and deep sap green later. And also, while the surface is still wet, we can add some texture of these leaves, just some brush strokes that will repeat the shape of the leaf. I'm placing very dark and dense color next to the stem, so it would create a very bright contrast. And then I load my brush with more watery mix, so it's basically the same color, but just more water. And I'm lifting the color from the right side to the left side. It helps to create a bit difference in the color value between these two areas, because if we will paint with just one color, it will be like too boring, and we need to create feeling of like real flower. And to do that, we need to mix one more mix. I'm using same colors, and I'm mixing Azomethine and Payne's gray, and using this dark color I will apply it on this dark area, lifting the color again. Our painting is almost done, and we can move to the final lesson where we will paint some details. The painting is fully dry right now, and I can add some second layer that will increase darkness of the shadows. But first, let's mix some dark color on the palette, and now I can highlight this dark area behind the stem from right side and on the left side. Contrasts are always helping to make picture look more appealing and bright. And final details are always about making some more intense shadows, more dark colors and areas. And now I'm using very dark color and add some darker lines where I need to and where I want to separate the foreground from the background. I want to add some light green lines on the leaves of the tulip that will highlight the texture of the leaves. And normally for these final details, I'm using just colors that I have already on my palette. Make sure that you don't put a lot of lines, it should be just few. And make sure that the lines are not very dark. And that's it, our painting is done. Thank you for joining this class, and I hope to see your paintings in the class projects section. Also, you can share your paintings on Instagram and tag my account Gogh to be featured on my stories. Thank you for painting with me. Please don't forget to share your painting in the class project section and leave a review. I hope to see you in my other classes.